Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Kathy Fitzmaurice from the Central Office, and I'll be your host for today's webinar, Key Elements of an Effective Government Contracting Marketing Strategy. Your microphones and telephones are currently muted to eliminate background noise during the program. We'll take questions at the end of the presentation. To ask a question, type it into the question box on your control panel, or if you have a working microphone, raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon and I will unmute you. Today's program is being recorded and will be available through WebMQS in the Shared Resources section. So let's get started. I'm very pleased to introduce Judy Wolf, Government Contracting Coordinator at our Mohawk Valley SBDC. Welcome, Judy.
Hello and thank you. Take it from here?
Yep, take it away.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, hello and good morning, everyone. I'm just delighted that you are here joining us today. As you saw in the description that Kathy sent out, this training covers a lot of territory, and I actually developed and presented this training at the end of December for Empire State Development's Training Tuesday webinar series for minority and women-owned business enterprises. And the response that it got made Roxanne and I both think that it would be a good idea to share it with our procurement advisors and, of course, anyone else who's interested and sitting in on the call, so that you can all get a sense of what I shared with them, MWBEs out there. My plan for this webinar is to give the presentation as it was originally created, so that it's from the perspective of a client rather than an advisor. This should hopefully make it easy to translate into what you yourself can then be sharing with your clients to supplement what you're already doing. So for this presentation to you, I'm going to skip the overview that I did of the SBDC network, but otherwise it's essentially the same presentation. So one thing that's important to note is that this means that there's an emphasis on MWBEs just because of the original audience, but pretty much everything I talk about here is applicable to all small businesses. And at the federal level, as you all know, I'm sure, there is a 23% small business utilization goal as well, so additionally applicable there. As always, your thoughts on how to improve, whether it's this training or any suggestions you might have for additional trainings, either for ourselves internally as procurement advisors and or for our clients, are completely welcome. So please make sure to send those to me. And or we can work together to develop those. So, key elements of an effective government contracting marketing strategy. That is a mouthful, and as I said, it is a topic that covers a lot of ground, and since we only have 1 hour, I am going to jump right in and try to make this as useful as possible by expanding your understanding of how the RFX world looks and how you can maximize your efforts in the world of government contracting. The term RFX that I just mentioned is the acronym for collectively referring to RFPs, RFIs, and RFQs, which are respectively requests for proposal, requests for information, and requests for quote or requests for qualifications, depending on the industry that you're in. So our agenda today, as you can see on the screen, is actually going to build on a training webinar that Empire State Development presented back in May, entitled Understanding How to Respond to an RFP. Now that webinar was presented by Lauren Linakis, who some of you may know. She's down in the LaGuardia PTAC, and she did a fantastic job of outlining what goes into an RFP and how to dissect it. And actually I have a copy, the recording of the webinar is no longer available. ESD made some changes so that that's no longer online, but I do have a copy of her slides if any of you would like that, so just shoot me an email and let me know and I can get that over to you. So in her webinar, as I said, she outlines what goes into an RFP and how to dissect it, and in this presentation I'm going to springboard off of that webinar and into a discussion of additional things like RFP timelines and the proposal process, including the #1 mistake that new government contracting vendors make, and how all of these considerations can realistically fit into a small business's business development life cycle. So emphasis there on the word realistically. So even though we're going to cover a lot of territory, as I said in the original webinar when I presented this, don't get overwhelmed, and if you do, hang in there. So after we cover all that, we also dive into tools and resources available to small businesses as they figure out who's buying what they sell, where those audiences hang out, how to contact and influence them. We're also going to talk about subcontracting, including where to find those opportunities, and a discussion about discretionary spending. And that piece, I think, for our procurement advisors is going to be the real meat of here's the kind of thing that we can be doing to take what we're doing with our procurement clients to that next level of like, okay, it's not just walking through certification, it's now what do you do with that, and how do you develop your business in this particular niche. We're going to then wrap it up with some considerations for when to respond to an RFP and when not to respond to an RFP, as well as some hints for how to improve your proposals, your client's proposals in this case. So like I said, a lot of information in a short amount of time, so let's dive in. As I mentioned, Lauren Lanakis did a terrific presentation on responding to RFPs. In it, she covered what an RFP is and how they're created, the general acquisition process, and then how to dissect and respond to an RFP. Now, Ibrahima of Empire State Development told me that they're looking at scheduling a rerun of Lauren's webinar in 2017, so sometime this year. And then I highly recommend watching it when they do. But like I said, I also have her slides if you'd like me to forward those to you in the meantime. I'm not going to repeat here what she already covered, but I do want to quickly review one element of it, and then I'm going to springboard off of that. Now, Lauren broke her discussion very usefully. Talking about the general acquisition process, she broke it into two main phases. The first is where the government entity reviews its mission, determines its needs and requirements, and starts to define and describe the scope of work requirements for what they want to buy. Acquisition planning is likely happening in parallel to those activities and is where the procurement team starts figuring out how it will go about acquiring the item or service that's required by the technical team that's putting together the scope of work. Now, this becomes what Lauren defined as phase 2. In an RFP situation, the procurement team plans for and puts together the solicitation package, releases it for competition, evaluates the responses, and makes the selection based on predetermined criteria, which should be published in the bid documents or RFP, and then negotiates with the selected vendor or vendors and awards the contract. Now, the #1 mistake of vendors who are new to government contracting is focusing on that end game, phase 2, the RFP itself, rather than realizing how much larger the playing field is and how powerful and influential those early and middle stages of the RFP development cycle can be. So there's actually a maxim in the proposal management world that if you didn't know ahead of time that the RFP was hitting the streets, don't bother responding. Now, this may or may not always be true, and I am not offering it as a piece of advice necessarily because there are other considerations that go into it as well. But there is definitely wisdom behind those words that's worth understanding. So we're going to take a look at that now. For a typical new government contracting vendor focused on the end game, that, as you can see in the upper right-hand corner, that end game, the RFP itself, the world sort of looks like this. Chaos, right? The RFP comes out, big surprise. You scramble to review it. You're looking through the RFP for clues as to what exactly they're looking for. Maybe you start making a few phone calls to see who might know something about it. You start digging for information on the entity since you likely don't have an existing relationship or you would have known about the RFP. You try to locate people who might have relationships you can leverage to get them to prefer or even just consider doing business with you. You rush around looking for potential partners to fill any capability gaps that you might have in fulfilling the RFP requirements. Maybe you check out the competition if you have a spare moment, and somewhere in there you decide whether to respond, and if the answer is yes, you start writing. Usually in a mad dash because once the RFP comes out, you typically don't have much time to respond. By the time you see it, it can be, you know, days or maybe, if you're lucky, a couple of weeks off. And of course, you have to build in time to not only write it, but also review, edit, and publish your proposal, and build in time for delivery so you make sure it gets there by the deadline, knowing, of course, that Murphy's Law will inevitably come into play. That's like a rule in in proposal management. You will encounter Murphy's Law right at the very end with the printer breaking down, or you don't have the right paper, or whatever it is. So all very stressful, very discombobulated, and if you or your clients have had this experience, you're not alone. This is normal. Now, if we take a breath and we take a look at how seasoned pros view the RFP timeline, it can be a very different story, and this is where we gain some really important insight. Professional government contractors start developing their response strategy 2 or more years before the RFP ever comes out. I remember in my past life when I first learned this that this was mind-blowing to me. It explained so much about our experience as a medium-sized business going after these government contracts. So the more sophisticated and experienced companies are proactively identifying their prime markets. They are prioritizing their prospects and opportunities, and they're developing a plan for building relationships as part of their day-to-day marketing efforts. Their sales team, which is also known as a capture team in proposal management lingo, then expands on those relationships and starts collaborating with the customer on identifying needs and challenges and developing potential solutions. In other words, they're shaping demand. So during this time, they are analyzing their competition and their offerings, and they are already looking for potential partners and subcontractors whose products and services fit well within the solution they're developing. They're figuring out competitive pricing ranges, figuring out if this is actually business they want to go after and can win while still making an acceptable amount of money. These activities then expand and pick up during the 6 months prior to the RFP even coming out. On the federal level especially, agencies will actively seek input from private industry to make sure that they're crafting an RFP that truly seeks the best, most technologically current, effective, and applicable solution for the government. Now, we'll see a little bit more on that later in the presentation. But smart contractors are on top of and participating actively in this process. And that involvement could take the form of things like white papers, technical papers, presentations, research and studies, scope of work discussions, industry days. And this concept isn't limited to federal procurement. At any level of government, you can always be collaborating with agency end users and thinking ahead about the types of needs that are out there and what sorts of solutions you and your business partners and subcontractors want to craft and offer together. So in this scenario, the RFP is no surprise when it hits the streets. Proposal writing and management is a whole training series in and of itself, so we won't go too far into detail here today, but I have included resources at the end for places your clients can get training, or you can if you'd like to expand your knowledge in this area. And that's something that's well worth doing sooner rather than later if government contracting and proposal writing are becoming a big part of a company's business development model. One of the most well-known training firms in this industry is Shipley Associates, and they were kind enough to allow me to share with you their 96-step business development life cycle. Yes, you heard me right, 96 steps. As you can see from this graphic, they do a great job of breaking down the process. Now, don't be overwhelmed by this graphic. Even Shipley will be the first to tell you that few, if any, firms out there, even the largest ones, follow every single step in this process. The secret is to understand the logic and the intention behind it, and then figure out what components apply to you and use those to build your own approach. So I'm sharing it here just because it does such a great job of illustrating that larger picture that we've been talking about. It is very eye-opening from a business development perspective. So just to show you again what I was talking about in terms of where most vendors focus, especially when they're new to government contracting, you can see here what a narrow band in the overall life cycle is taken up by the RFP and the proposal process itself. And yet here's where the relationships and trust get built that really help to differentiate the winners when it comes to government contracting. As I was researching for these statistics, I actually found this interesting estimate of vendors' chances of winning an RFP that illustrates the point perfectly. So according to the authors of Powerful Proposals, responding blindly to RFPs after they come out gives you an estimated 10% chance of winning versus developing those relationships early in the process and thereby bumping your chances up to 60 to 70%. Yeah, whopping difference. Now, even if those numbers aren't rigorously scientifically accurate, they still speak to the anecdotal impact that are seen by professionals in the industry and the importance of having established relationships in place before expending your limited staff time and resources on responding to an RFP. So, having now glimpsed the larger picture, it would be perfectly understandable if at this moment you are feeling completely overwhelmed and maybe even a little bit discouraged. This feeling is perfectly normal. So you as a small business owner are already doing, well, everything, and now we want to add to your list. Don't despair. Our next step is to talk about how all this translates realistically into a small business's business development strategy. We're going to start by taking a moment to step back and realizing that you are already doing business development. If you're in business, you already think about marketing. You already think about sales. You already think about proposing solutions to the folks you want to work with. Government contracting just adds a new audience to your marketing and sales efforts and formalizes the procurement process so that it's open and fair, which is a good thing when it comes to spending taxpayer dollars. So think about it this way. Looking at the public and private sectors side by side, you already do marketing. You're now just adding the public sector to your existing private sector prospects. You already do sales, which you'll adjust to think of as capture in the public sector, but it's still just a collaborative sales process. You already have to get some sort of commitment, maybe even providing a bid or proposal to your private sector clients, and you end up in the end with a contract or a purchase. In the public sector, this is all done through the procurement process, either formally through the RFX and proposal process, or less formally under discretionary spending authority. And then, if all goes well, you win the business. So, revisiting that 96-step Shipley life cycle for just a moment and breaking it into larger chunks, we see that just like the private sector, it's really just marketing, sales, proposing a solution, and next steps after an award is made, either to you or to your competition. The only difference in the public sector is that an RFP came out. So my advice is not to overcomplicate things. You'll already be ahead of the curve if you understand that there's this larger picture in the background, and then just keep it in mind as you go about developing and implementing your overall marketing, sales, proposal strategy. Just building this understanding and this new audience into what you already do will help put you ahead, and this presentation is intended to help you do that. As with any business development strategy, you're going to start by understanding your audience and their operating environment. In the case of government contracting, this means you need to understand the agency's goals, the regulations and rules the agency has to operate within when it comes to purchasing products and services, and the purchasing vehicles they have available for acquiring those things. So, starting with goals, the underlying goals of most government agencies' procurement efforts will include ensuring fair and open competition, obtaining the best value for taxpayers and the public they serve, and implementing public policy around socioeconomic issues. Take the time to educate yourself around the procurement regulations at the level of government you're planning to do business with. I've included links to relevant procurement guidelines for New York State and the federal government. You'll also want to research and understand the local purchasing deadlines for any local government agencies or jurisdictions you're doing business with. Understand where your audience goes to buy things. At the state level, there is a great resource on doing business with New York State that outlines many of the requirements and resources that are available to you from a business development standpoint. For example, New York State has an order of preference for where agencies can find products and services that meet their form, function, and utility before they go out to bid. This is outlined in detail in the Doing Business with New York State document that I referred to and that I include a link to here at the bottom. And it includes preferred sources, OGS centralized contracts, existing state agency contracts, and then a new procurement effort, including discretionary spending, if the need can't be met through any of those other avenues. In addition to trying to get on some of these contracts as a prime contractor, the person who has that direct contract with the agency, you may find that opportunities for you as a subcontractor or supplier exist at these other levels too, and we're going to talk about that more during the subcontracting section of this webinar. Similarly, at the federal level, there are a variety of options for where agencies might obtain the items and services that they need. So all bid opportunities valued at $25,000 or more are required to be posted on FedBizOps, which is FBO.gov. So that's a great place to register for a free vendor account and receive notifications about opportunities that may apply to you. GSA schedules may be worth considering depending on your industry. Many small businesses do a lot of sales under the micro purchasing threshold. Some businesses do well in the reverse auction environment. And knowing how set-aside and sole source contracting work for small businesses and businesses eligible for certifications such as WOSB, the Women-Owned Small Business, economically disadvantaged women-owned small business, HubZone, and 8A can be a powerful tool in your business development efforts. In those cases, the competitive field is limited to just companies with the relevant size or certifications. So, and here at the bottom under trainings, you can see both SBA and GSA have excellent information for small businesses that are available on their websites to help you get started. The organization WIP, or Women Impacting Public Policy, and American Express Open also have an excellent series of free webinars as part of the Give Me 5 project, which are well worth checking out if you plan to move into federal contracting. I regularly recommend these trainings, and particularly the WIP webinars, to clients as a place to learn more. All right, your next challenge is to understand your audience. Just like in private industry where you've got the end users, the influencers, decision makers, and finance folks to please, you've got multiple audiences when it comes to the public sector as well. So within an agency, you'll have technical end users, the folks who are typically involved in putting together the scope of work and technical requirements, and with whom you will likely be working after you win the award, as well as the procurement officers who are working with them to buy what they need. As a small business, you'll likely have prime contractors as one of your audiences as well. You should already be familiar with them to some degree, at least conceptually, from your existing private industry sales and marketing experience. You'll also have potential teaming partners, some of whom may already have ins with the agencies you covet relationships with, and you're going to want to cultivate relationships with key referral sources, influencers, and decision makers just as you would with any other sale. Basically, as with any business development strategy, you want as many people on board with the idea of doing business with you and preferring you over your competition as possible. So the big question, where can you find these people? Just as within any other industry, the people you want to connect with will be available for informational meetings with you as a potential solution provider. So get their ear, ask for a meeting to discuss how you can bring value to their organization, and use that opportunity to demonstrate your expertise and learn what they really need. That's the most important part, learning what they really need. Government staff typically have a profession that they associate themselves with, whether related to their area of expertise or their functional role within the organization, and they will attend conferences, trainings, industry events, and networking events related to that area of interest. You can potentially meet them on-site at projects where you're working as a sub, and especially at the local level at relevant committee and community meetings. So make the effort to find them. Shake a hand, get a card, and follow up afterward, and keep doing it. Be persistent. It's the key to any business development strategy and success. Now, to save you a little homework on the state level, here are a few resources to keep in your hip pocket for locating the appropriate agency to approach about what you do or sell. We're going to dive briefly into a few of these now. The Directory of Frequently Purchased Commodities and Services is a great starting place for honing in on the agency or agencies that are most likely to be interested in what you sell. So for example, if you do electrical work, you can learn from the directory that New York State spends about $8.5 million a year in this subcategory, which falls under the larger umbrella of building and property. You can then dig in and see which agencies specifically spend more within that umbrella category. For example, here you would probably not spend your time approaching the Board of Elections, which spends nothing in this category, or the Commission on Judicial Conduct, which spends less than $25,000, but you would instead focus your efforts on the various agencies that spend more than $5 million annually in this category, or $1 million. You can see I've highlighted a bunch of them. This particular category is pretty big spending. Once you know what agencies are buying your products or services, you can then look them up in the New York State Contract Opportunities book, which is updated each year for the MWBE forum that's held in Albany each October. And this event, as you all know, is one that we should all be recommending to our clients and telling them to prioritize for their learning and networking opportunities, because it is a really well-run event. All the state agencies are there, and it's just well worth attending especially for MWBEs, but any small business can learn from some of the seminars that are going on there, the workshops and presentations. So each page of the opportunities book covers a state agency or authority and tells you what they do, what they buy, how they buy, and whom to contact for more information or for assistance in navigating the agency. Now typically, I'm going to hone in on the page here a little bit. Blowing it up made it blurry, so I apologize for that. But as you can see here, typically this is going to be like an MWBE coordinator or some other liaison who can assist you or your client in this case. Let's see. You can also find a listing of New York State agency contacts and websites online in the New York State Agency Directory, which can be a handy resource and starting place if you're having trouble locating an agency. You can find agency forecasts for projected purchases between $5,000 and $50,000 posted quarterly, and for purchases over $200,000 posted semi-annually on the New York State Contract Reporter. So this can be a great way to get ahead of the curve on potential contracting opportunities that may be coming up in your area of interest. So to find them, you log into your vendor account, your free vendor account on the New York State Contract Reporter, and select, as you can see from this menu, Procurement Reports from the Notices and Reports menu. You can then click on a report to see the details as shown on this slide. You can see here that you have the agency, the division, a contact for more information, and the categories in which they anticipate their projected spending to take place. So that can be very informative, and then you can follow up with the contact who's listed to find out more. On the federal side, you'll be looking for similar information just on different sites. So here we have USASpending.gov, which is a rich resource for finding out what agencies are buying. FPDS, or the Federal Procurement Data System, lets you dig down as well to access various reports. And you can find agency procurement forecasts on acquisition.gov. I can't talk. And there is also information, acquisition.gov, and then there's also information to be found on FBO.gov. So let's just take a quick look at some of these. I personally find USASpending.gov to be an easy-to-use resource. It's going to let you drill down by state, industry, agency, bureau, and vendor to see details about where the federal government is spending its budget dollars. Here, for example, is some of the information you can get when you drill down into a particular agency. There's a bunch more. You can we'll see a little bit more on this later. FPDS, I personally find less intuitive and easy to use, but it still contains some interesting information if you want to dig around a little bit. And if you figure out that it's got some gold mine of information, let me know, because I'd love to learn more about it. I tend to lean towards acquisition.gov when I'm doing my research on things. So when you first land on it, you'll see this screen and you'll be able to access some general public information. Once you create an account and log in, you're going to see the screen for FPDS Next Generation. You can see that in the upper left-hand corner there, and be able to access some standard reports, create ad hoc reports, and perform searches. So this screenshot, for example, shows some of the standard reports that are available telling you what types of products and services the federal government has been buying. To access agency procurement forecasts, you can go to acquisition.gov and poke around for what interests you. And on FBO.gov, you can not only search for current bid opportunities, which is what most people who go here are thinking of doing, but you can also learn about how to use the site under that Getting Started tab and how to get started as a small business. So they have some videos you can watch and some other information there that may be useful to your clients. Back on the FBO.gov page, you can click on Vendor Collaboration for a window into the current opportunities for pre-RFP input from industry. That's that sweet spot we were talking about earlier, that your clients can start building into their business development lifecycle. So let's see, clicking on that, you can search for postings that are relevant to your industry or interests. For example, here you can see I searched for IT collaboration opportunities, and a few pulled up. Here I searched for social media opportunities and came up with this one for the Department of Education, which is holding what's called an Industry Day, where the agency is specifically seeking input from small business on how best to promote the National Assessment Governing Board and related activities. As you can see in the portion highlighted in yellow here, they are specifically calling for small business input and involvement. As with any other industry, you are interested in influencing decision makers to choose your product and service over that of your competitors. And the more people they hear about you from that they trust, the better. So knowing where your audience turns for information and advice is an important part of shaping your business development strategy. Who are the industry experts they listen to? What publications are they likely to read? What platforms will they be most likely to trust and respect when they Google you and your company to learn more about you before granting a meeting? The more legitimate you appear, the higher you rank in their estimation. So I hope it goes without saying that you need to have a professional-looking website when they go looking for you. That should be a given. Establishing yourself as an expert in your field is tried and true business development advice that is well worth acting on, especially in the government contracting realm. One of the best ways of doing this is to make sure that you really listen to them when you meet with your audience. Be a true consultant. This is key. It can even mean pointing them in the right direction for them, even if it's not you at that moment. This is how you build trust. If you're an industry expert guiding them in their decision making, it might mean you guide them to a different answer right at that moment, but long term, you've just built a relationship. So helping them to analyze their agency's challenges and potential solutions. Another thing you can do is provide white papers. You can become a speaker at industry events. You can offer trainings that your audience will find attractive and helpful. Establish your online presence so when they go looking for you, they find an industry expert they want to work with. And establishing an online presence doesn't just mean a website. It means when they Google you, you come up as the author of or the person quoted in articles within your industry, and you've presented webinars, you've been a trainer, you've appeared at conferences, whatever it is. Like, so that online presence is all that stuff they find when they go searching for you. Moving on from government agencies, another key element of your government contracting business development strategy as a small business will likely be marketing yourself as a subcontractor. Stop for a moment and ask yourself, what do prime contractors care about? We hear over and over that primes are looking for quality partners with strong past performance and all the required insurances and credentials in place. They want legitimate partners with the expertise and the wherewithal to do the work that they're contracted to do. So think about it. The prime contractor's reputation is the one on the line, since they are ultimately the responsible party. So of course they also care about things like price, and they want your help positioning the whole team to win when it comes to things like pricing. They care about integrity, responsiveness, communication, and of course your certifications that help them meet their utilization requirements in the case of MWBEs or as a small business. Making sure that you mention that as a differentiator is important, but way too often we hear companies that walk in making it sound like that's all they've got to offer a prime contractor, and they're looking for so much more. It's really important to keep that in mind. You may also find, especially if you're a small business or an MWBE, or a service-disabled veteran-owned business, you may find you want to search for other MWBE and SDVOB firms to partner with, usually with one of you subcontracting to the other, so that you can form a stronger team with broader capabilities in going after government work. You'll find subcontracting, contracting, and partnering opportunities on many of the same platforms. I'm going to split out subcontracting for special emphasis in a little bit, but your resources are going to be largely the same, so there'll be some overlap here. On the federal level, all bid opportunities over $25,000 are going to be posted to FBO.gov. You can use USASpending.gov to find agencies that are spending money on your types of products or services. You can use the dynamic small business search to find other small businesses in complementary fields. You can check out GSA schedule holders for potential subcontracting and partnership opportunities. And of course, the SBDC offers a free bid matching service, bid links, we all know and love, as do the PTACs if you have clients located near one of their offices. On the state and local front, you'll want to register on the New York State Contract Reporter, which is where all state agencies, authorities, state universities, and public benefit corporations are required to post bid opportunities valued at over $50,000. The contract reporter is your only source for many of these opportunities since they do not let any bid matching services scrape their data. BidLinks will fill in the gaps and let you see local bid opportunities on a state-by-state basis, so you can choose your coverage area with BidLinks. In New York State, the Empire State Purchasing Group is a regional group of about 200 local government agencies that have decided to use the BidNet Direct platform to advertise their procurement opportunities. And as many of you know, BidLinks does scrape information off the Empire State Purchasing Group, but the link will take our clients to the login screen for BidNet Direct, where they then have to, it's a free vendor account. They should not have to pay for that. What they'd be paying for would be e-notifications, but BidLinks ends up serving as their free e-notification. So combining the two becomes the best of both worlds, and for a free vendor account and our free BidLinks service, they can access any of the postings from those approximately 200 government entities that are part of the Empire State Purchasing Group. You can also go directly to the individual websites for any of the agencies that you want to target and sign up for procurement notifications and get on their approved vendor lists. You can look at OGS's centralized contracts listing to see what upcoming opportunities there might be for you as a prime or as a sub or authorized dealer for existing contract holders. And of course, there's discretionary spending, which is more based on relationship building and is a great place to focus your efforts as a small business starting into government contracting. We're going to talk about that more shortly. To register for the New York State Contract Reporter, simply sign up and create a business entity account. Once you're all set up and you're logged in, you can search for opportunities and events that you may wish to respond to or participate in. You're all familiar with the Contract Reporter, but this is the dashboard. If you haven't already set yourself up with an account, I highly recommend that you do so that you can poke around and get an idea of what your clients are seeing when they get in there. As I mentioned, I decided to separate out where to find subcontracting opportunities because it's such an important part of getting your feet wet in the government contracting world as a small business. You can glean valuable information by looking at current and past contract awards, interested vendor lists, pre-bid meeting attendance lists, and a variety of subcontracting and certification directories. You can also approach existing preferred sources to see about getting into their supply chain. On the private sector side, you may be interested in looking into platforms like Supplier Connection, which is designed to help small businesses connect with large companies. You can attend and network at matchmaker events, and of course use the resources that we've talked about previously, like USASpending.gov, to find companies that already hold contracts and may need subcontractors and suppliers. And last but not least, while it costs money to be part of them, many of the third-party certification providers bring added value to their members by maintaining directories that larger businesses use to find certified MWBEs. So just to give you a quick idea of how you might use these tools to track down a subcontracting opportunity, let's start again with the directory of frequently purchased commodities and services. So let's say you sell gasoline or diesel vehicle fuel. You can see that New York State spent $47.5 and $23.8 million respectively in each of these categories. You can then drill down to find which agencies spend the most on vehicle fuel, and you could at this stage go back to the opportunities book to figure out where to start with finding a contact within that agency. But with something like vehicle fuel, you know that a lot of state agencies purchase this commodity, so you suspect that maybe there's a centralized contract already in place for it. So in this case, you go to the OGS website and you click on Commodity Contracts, which takes you to the list of OGS centralized commodity contracts and, as you can see here in the call-out, the contract group for fuel, gasoline, and diesel engine. Now when you click on that, you see that there are 3 awards currently listed under this group. And I'm about to cough, so I'm going to mute myself for a sec. Sorry about that. Now you drill in a little bit deeper and you can see a variety of information about this contract, including when it expires, who the contact person is at the state, who can use this contract, pricing information, and a bunch of details about the award and the contract. With most contracts, you'll be able to dig in and find a list of contract holders. Sometimes there's even an MWBE list on there. But you can go digging for the list of contract holders and their contact information, which gives you a great place to start when it comes to inquiring about becoming a subcontractor or an authorized dealer for them. Similarly, on the state level with Open Book New York, you can dive into information about government spending on a variety of levels. So clicking on state contracts, you can see a listing of which vendors have been awarded contracts with, in this case, the Albany Convention Center Authority, just as an example. You could also choose to drill down by vendor to see all the contracts they hold and payments they've received. I've mentioned discretionary spending a few times during this webinar, and it is such an important part of a small business's business development strategy that I really want to spend a moment on this topic. Discretionary spending refers to the purchases made below a certain dollar amount that require a less formal procurement process. These bid opportunities do not have to go out for formal, wide-scale competition. The agencies do have to demonstrate that the price is reasonable, so they are required to get at least 3 quotes or to otherwise justify how it was determined that the cost is reasonable, but clearly very different than the formal RFP process. So if getting 3 quotes is one of those things they can do by phone or email, but other ways of justifying the cost might also include cost to other government entities, historical cost or price comparisons, or making sure that the pricing is at OGS contracted rates or less where that's applicable. So make a note, your clients, knowing how their prices stack up can be helpful not just in terms of their own competitive awareness, but also for them to have in their hip pocket to help the agencies they're trying to do business with to buy from them. So nice piece of advice there. The quotes themselves can be informal. You know, I mentioned it could be by phone or email. So email is good for any level of quote up to 200,000 when we're dealing with MWBEs and small businesses, actually, all small businesses. And even it can just be over the phone for any contracts up to 50,000. So that's nice to note as well. Just very, very informal compared to that, you know, larger playing field. And nicely enough, speaking of larger playing fields, where appropriate, discretionary purchases can be limited to small businesses, MWBEs, or SDVOBs, service disabled veteran-owned businesses. So this all means that once you develop those relationships and convince an agency that you're the firm they want to do business with, the competitive field is going to be much narrower, which is clearly to your client's advantage. Here's a summary. Many of you are familiar with this table repurposed here. This is how discretionary spending thresholds look for different state agencies and authorities depending on the category or type of purchase. As you can see here, the threshold for MWBEs and small businesses is significantly higher at 200,000 than that for medium and large-sized businesses. And this is really cool. I picked this up at the purchasing forum last year. That's 200,000 the agency can spend per 12-month period, starting from the date of purchase, for the same commodity or service. So what's particularly cool about that is that this $200,000 cap does not apply to the entire state government as a whole. It's $200,000 by agency and for each specific commodity or service. So theoretically, you could sell $200,000 in widgets to one state agency and sell $200,000 in widgets to another state agency, and then sell the first state agency $200,000 in what's-its, which, you know, are clearly different than widgets, and so on and so forth, thus doing hundreds of thousands of dollars in business with state agencies without ever going over the discretionary spending limits, and thus based almost entirely on relationship building. So all that is likely very much in line with your client's existing business development strategy. Yay! Good news. So to me, I think for obvious reasons, discretionary spending is an obvious sweet spot for small business in general, and especially for MWBEs and SDVOBs, since agencies can also get credit toward their utilization goals for doing business with those companies. Here are some links and resources for educating yourself more about discretionary spending in New York State and for sharing with your clients. Many local governments also have discretionary spending thresholds, which vary by locality, so you'll want to research those for any local government target markets you're planning to approach. So this can be a very powerful relationship building tool. Circling back around, let's return to the RFP process for a final moment. Now that you have all those relationships in place, it is worth stopping to consider when you're actually going to spend your valuable time and resources on responding to an RFP. There are whole checklists you can develop or find examples of online for considerations that might go into this decision for you, but a few key reasons you might want to invest in responding include times when the RFP was written for you, clearly, or when you determine that it is firmly within your capabilities and expertise to the point where you meet and exceed their qualification requirements and can blow them out of the water with your solution. This might also be an organization that you have targeted as key to your growth strategy. So it's worth it to you to market to them through the proposal and raise their awareness of your capabilities, whether you win or not. Or it might be that you want to hone your proposal writing skills and get feedback on your efforts. So all of these are equally valid reasons for responding. There are also many reasons why you may not want to respond to an RFP. A key consideration that will not surprise you after today's discussion is whether you have an established relationship with the organization and its key stakeholders. The fit also matters, as do your qualifications to respond. You'll want to make sure you feel confident in your response and have sufficient time and resources to respond. So as we talked about earlier, the opportunity cost can be high, especially when you have limited staff as a small business. It might just be you. And if you or your staff are writing or working on a proposal, this means you're not doing other things that might be more important to you at this moment. So only you can decide that for your business. You want to make sure you've done your cost calculations and looked at overhead to make sure that you'll make a reasonable profit while coming in at a price that can win the award. And one of the most important considerations is whether the RFP appears to be wired for someone else, in which case many companies decide they don't want to waste their time. If you've done your competitive research and developed relationships ahead of time, you should already know whether an agency is happy or unhappy with the incumbent, for example, and what factors you can emphasize that might help tip the award your way this time around. Constant improvement is always important in any effort, but particularly in proposal development. Some people feel like they're operating in the dark when it comes to putting their proposals together and putting together their pricing and all that stuff. So some key ways to constantly improve your proposals include staying on top of industry trends and knowing your customer. Knowing your customer is always the foundation of a good proposal and solution. I tell people they can tap into the New York SBDC's research network to help perform industry and competitive research and learn more about their customers. Of course, this third bullet actually is, I think, one of the most powerful tools of all when it comes specifically to proposals, is submitting FOIA requests for proposals, pricing, evaluator comments, and final contracts on the awards that you find relevant. Because this is a goldmine of information. It allows you to dissect and analyze your competitors' proposals and compare them with your own to assess your relative strengths and weaknesses and look for ways to improve. And of course, there's pricing information in there too, which is nice. Of course, this last bullet is key as well if you're involved in this kind of effort of putting together formal proposals. Always, always, always ask for debriefs from the agency, whether you win or lose the award. Empire State Development, Ibrahima told me this, is actually putting a special emphasis on debriefs because they are such an important tool for learning and improving your proposals and bids. And he shared with me that far too few MWBEs are requesting them. So making sure that we encourage our clients to ask for debriefs can help give them an important competitive edge. So, and knowing there's often a time frame on when this can be requested, so we need to pay attention to this and make sure our clients, we let our clients know they want to get their request submitted in a timely manner so they don't miss this opportunity. All right, whew, big sigh. That concludes the main bulk of what I wanted to cover with you today. I know it's a ton of information. These next two slides that I included here, knowing you would get them, contain a bunch of resources and links that can help you on this journey into government contracting proficiency. Here's the second set of them. As you can see, I included Shipley Associates and some other training associations for the proposal part. I know clients have a lot of questions on that. And then I actually added this additional info slide just for us here today, just to share some resources that came up during the Q&A portion of the ESD webinar in answer to a question about how to identify potential areas of opportunity. So Ibrahima Soare pointed participants to the state's Supply and Demand Utilization Initiative, which we should all be familiar with. The website here, the ESD Business Development Assistance website, has several items of information on it. The Training Tuesday webinars that I mentioned, the Supply and Demand Utilization Initiative, and then the New York State now has its own MWBE Mentor Protege program. We should all be familiar with the website and the resources and programs that ESD is promoting. So I highly encourage you to check it out after this webinar. Just click on those links and take you there. So, ta-da! I hope that's all been helpful to you. I am happy to stick around if anyone has any questions.
Thanks, Judy. We do have a question going back to bid links. Are the FBO and GSA covered in bid links, or should they sign up on those?
They are covered in bid links. Yeah, bid links. And for procurement advisors, we can actually go and download a listing of all the various sites that BidLinks searches daily. So if folks have questions on how to do that, shoot me an email on the PAC listserv and I can get those instructions out to everybody.
Great.
Actually, I'll just do that.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you for that question. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Well, if you think of any afterwards, you do know where to find Judy. Judy, as always, great presentation. That was a lot of information. So thank you very, very much. And we'll go ahead and end the webinar. Do you have, Andrea wants to know, could I just see one more time the slide with the information on, which slide, Andrea? On contracting amounts.
Contracting amounts?
Yes.
I don't even remember what we're talking about. Contracting amounts.
Was for federal, SUNY, state, oh, the discretionary.
Yep, got it. Is this the one?
Yep, that's the one.
Ta-da! And there's actually, there is a handout that I can send a link to as well. I'll send, actually,
if you want to send it to me, I can, the handout, I could put it in MQS.
I was going to say you can, oh yeah, good thinking, we can do that. Well, also though, these links right here, which is the next slide after this one, these are the links directly to the most updated version of those. So my thought is rather than us having it on the MQS and possibly having it be out of date, it might be better to have people do the live link.
Okay, that sounds good. All right, Andrea says great. And Judy says, or Jocelyn says, thank you, Judy. Anybody else have any other questions or comments?
I just want everyone to send me suggestions for additional trainings that we want to develop for whether it's clients or for ourselves. So putting the plug out for that, please, please, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Judy. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I'll go ahead and end this webinar.